now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme, CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
The committee believes that more than sufficient evidence exists for a criminal referral. President Trump intended to disrupt the peaceful transition of power under our Constitution.
The president's December 19th tweet galvanized domestic violent extremists.
For hours, he would not issue a public statement instructing his supporters to disperse and leave the Capitol. This was an utter moral failure and a clear dereliction of duty.
Those responsible should be held accountable.
Congress makes history. Will the Department of Justice follow suit? Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett, coming to you from Washington. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin tonight with the final public meeting of the January 6th Select Committee. The panel voted to refer multiple criminal charges to the Department of Justice against former President Trump and some of his associates over there and his alleged role in the Capitol Hill riot. The charges are as follows: conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of an official proceeding of Congress, conspiracy to make a false statement, and aiding an insurrection. The committee voted unanimously to approve its final report, which will include all interview transcripts and depositions. I will speak to committee member Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, in just a moment. But first, I am joined by my CBS News colleagues, congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane and chief political analyst John Dickerson, who, as you all know, is also the anchor of Primetime with John Dickerson. I want to start with Scott, who will walk us through the committee's meeting today. Scott?
Major, nearly 2 years after the Capitol insurrection, another historic moment today. The final public meeting of this House January 6th Select Committee. They're done in 14 days, but what an investigation it was. 18 months long, 1,000 interviews, and 1 million records secured. It concludes with a vote for criminal referrals against the former president and against John Eastman, his 11th hour legal advisor from California. The 4 recommendations for Trump: conspiracy, obstruction, false statements, and incitement of an insurrection, the highest level January 6th charge so far. These recommendations are just that. Recommendations, but they do go to the U.S. Justice Department, which, oh, by the way, has its hands full with January 6 prosecutions. Already 930 defendants charged. There are likely hundreds more arrests to come. About half of them have pleaded guilty so far. But again, the caseload is going to grow. What's important here, if there is an indictment of somebody because of these criminal referrals, will that indictment come here in the District of Columbia? If so, one number I want to leave you with. The Department of Justice in jury trials from January 6th is batting 1,100% of those cases have led to at least a partial conviction. Major?
Scott MacFarlane, thank you. Turning now to John Dickerson. John, for the audience's benefit, a criminal referral from Congress sounds really weighty, and it is, but it's not the final word, or not even nearly the final word.
Yes, although I feel like I should just quote you back to yourself, because when we were covering earlier today, you made the very good point, which is you have to, it doesn't have that weight, but you have to finish this job. And if you believe what the members of this committee believe, and which they've carefully laid out using people from within the Trump orbit, if you walk all the way there, you have to take the last step, or else you've undermined all the previous work you've done, which you have said is a direct if it's not done, if somebody's not held to account, it's a direct threat to democracy. So if you took yourself seriously all the way, you got to do this at the end.
And I want to play for you what Liz Cheney, the vice chair of this committee, said about not only what the committee has concluded, but what it ought to mean. Let's play Liz Cheney.
No man who would behave that way at that moment in time can ever serve in any position of authority in our nation again. He is unfit for any office.
Now, in that context, Liz Cheney is talking not only about the conspiratorial ways in which former President Trump tried to cling to power and tried to enlist others in an effort to block the peaceful transfer of power, but also on that fateful day, January 6th, watching this mayhem, this rolling crime being committed in full public view, did nothing.
He did nothing, and we saw even in new testimony from his close aide, Hope Hicks, which was unveiled today, that before any of it happened, she and others in the White House suggested that he make sure that those who were coming to Washington at his behest knew to be peaceful, that he send out a warning ahead of time, and he would not, which gets to that incitement charge, and the incitement charge has attached to it that you can't ever run for office again. And so it's interesting. I mean, this is both a specific legal charge that they are asking the Justice Department to bring, but it's also what's been at the center of this whole set of hearings and the whole Trump presidency, arguably, which is the moral standards for a president and the moral standards for those standing by him. And everybody had to check what their conscience told them. The heroes in this story did the right thing and blocked an effort to overthrow the peaceful transfer of power. Others didn't have a call from their conscience.
It is, in my experience, deeply important to former President Trump what those closest to him say. And it feels to me the committee held back Hope Hicks for this last moment because they know, the committee knows, how large Hope Hicks loomed in the communication between the former president when he was president, how he relied on her advice, how she was frequently the one and only whisperer who could confirm or could pull him back from some of his more volatile instincts, to put it mildly. And I think that's one of the reasons the committee saved her for last.
I think that's a really interesting take. You know the Trump orbit and presidency and the team so well. And when Hope Hicks said in testimony we saw today that her argument to Donald Trump was, this is going to hurt your legacy. Mm-hmm. So if anybody knows the inroads into Donald Trump, it would be Hope Hicks. And playing the legacy card is probably, certainly many of the others who implored him to say something talked about his legacy being damaged as well. But there's also always been the question with those closest around him, how much they buy into the legacy or how much they're, and so to hear her say that and say you're hurting your own legacy by, I mean, that was a moment for the screenplay when this is written because of how close she was to him and how among those who are closest to him, that's of course what they were worried about.
Not just screenplay, but miniseries, quite probably. I want to play for you Adam Schiff, member of the committee, talking about not only, this is a Washington story with lots of wreckage in Washington, the Capitol and otherwise, prosecutions, Department of Justice, but it's also an American story, John, because so many election workers were threatened either directly by the former president or by those who were threatening on his behalf. And I want to play what Adam Schiff said about that mentality that arose from everything that led up to and followed January 6th.
The treatment of Ms. Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss and so many others around the country was callous, inhuman, inexcusable, and dangerous. And those responsible should be held accountable.
Accountability. It is the ultimate word surrounding all of this.
It is, and it has circles that go out from it. So there's accountability for the president. And what he did on that day, there are others who stood by and watched who should be held accountable in a system that they depend on to run by norms and rules and all those things that were broken or at least were strained severely. But then what Adam Schiff was talking about, you know, the ripples that go out into the electorate, that go out into people who think, well, you know, if we didn't get the result we want, violence is an option. And there's still plenty of people out there who still believe that, and they were given sort of permission to believe that, not only by former President Trump, but by all those who didn't recoil at what they saw on the 6th of January, who called it legitimate discourse, who played footsie with the idea that, well, we're just asking questions when they knew full well there were no legitimate questions to be asked, that unleashes an energy in the system that's still out there, still going whether Donald Trump runs again or not. And that's something for whom a variety of people need to be held accountable, not just former President Trump, but all those who allowed those dangerous fires to burn.
You and I have both used that word, energy, out in the American population and political mainstream and bloodstream, not mainstream, but bloodstream. And it felt, John, as if in the midterms that was checked a bit.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you have reached a conclusion about how much the concessions that we saw arise from close races in the midterms and deniers in conspicuous races with statewide implications losing is a byproduct of what this committee did and laid before the American public.
I think you can make the case. It's not a direct line. You know, the direct line is pollsters went out and said, why did you vote for the Democrats? And they would say, well, because we watched every one of the hearings and we came to the conclusion that, you know, they didn't say that. But when people were asked about the threats to democracy, that certainly was informed by this. And by this, what I mean is not even necessarily the hearings, but that the hearings kept the conversation in the zeitgeist. And the conversation wasn't just what Donald Trump did, but the idea that if you don't check what happened on January 6th, you give permission to people to decide to go another way if the election doesn't go the way they want. And I think that certainly was a part of this last election in terms of, if nothing else, turning out Democrats. Now, of course, the great question will be, what happens in a presidential year where the stakes are higher, where people feel it even more existentially? We don't know. But where certainly the midterms checked what we were all afraid of. The question is whether they checked it for one election and it's just gone dormant, or whether January 6th was a blip and Americans will go back to having very strong, tough, partisan elections, but that don't go overboard the way things went on January 6th.
And it was said today by the committee that this work and this effort had two goals: to preserve unity, we'll see how that works out, but also to maintain institutions and the norms around them. That seems doable. And that seems like the committee's work and the rhetoric around it reinforced, if not all of our national commitment to those institutions, reminded us of their value.
Yes, I think you had, although I still think that's an open question. We'll see how this passes into history. You know, it's just amazing. There was a time when presidents were seen and the executive branch was seen as this sad little puppy, and Congress held the strength in the American system. And how dare you, Mr. President, kind of do anything that's on our turf? And the fact that there hasn't been an institutional reaction from both sides is a change in the place that we are. But to the extent that the hearings reinforced those institutions and had serious representatives of each: Justice Department, the police, and even members of Congress who restrained all of their impulses and carried out a hearing. I think you're right. This has been some tightening up where basically we've seen a lot of loosening.
John Dickerson, always a pleasure. Thank you so very much. You can stream CBS News Primetime with John Dickerson every Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. We now know what criminal charges the January 6th committee has in mind, but the future of these referrals is still somewhat unclear. Congressman Jamie Raskin, a member of the January 6th Select Committee, joins us next to discuss those steps. You're streaming Red and Blue, reporting across the political divide.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
Yoga and wellness has become a place of anti-science.
Online clickbait.
The algorithms feed you content based upon your own fantasy.
Potentially at my peril.
There's no question about it.
Spreading digital disinformation.
Their entire yoga studio and spiritual community got so embedded in all of the QAnon stuff that it became this sick place.
Why pro-health people are fertile ground for anti-science messages.
We can just go into the whole mask thing. A lot of us just believe that's symbolism for silencing people.
People are locked in this mindset. They've been taught to accept what the medical doctors say.
No longer are you going to be willing to take any medical advice.
It's a big problem that we urgently need to address.
An original CBS Reports documentary streaming now. An original CBS Reports documentary.
We need to put an end to this territorial status.
Will statehood create a better Puerto Rico?
So that we have the same quality of life that you see in the States.
What do you worry about?
Me living here in the future.
They're giving incentives to non-Puerto Ricans to come to Puerto Rico
and extract our natural resources and take over our land.
vacation in Puerto Rico, and in exchange for that, you don't pay taxes.
Why would I allow somebody who abused me for 123 years to then consume me?
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
When weather turns extreme,
states from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
Every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
We are so excited, we just can't hide it.
CBS mornings are, well, everything your morning should be.
Let's do it!
Let's go!
CBS mornings, starting at 7. Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
The president's December 19th tweet galvanized domestic violent extremists, including members of the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and organized militia groups. These individuals began organizing to come to the Capitol in large numbers with the specific intent to use violence to disrupt the certification of the election during the joint session.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I am Major Garrett. January 6th committee member Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, joins me now. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. He is coming to us via Zoom, I believe, from his congressional office. There he is. So, Congressman Raskin, I believe the public, certainly some journalists, myself included, thought there might be more names in the referrals today. Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, will they be part of a referral message from the committee in days hence?
Well, those people you mentioned, Major, and thank you for having me, are all very much part of our report. What you heard from us today were those individuals where the committee feels we have an overwhelming and abundant amount of evidence to justify a criminal referral to the Department of Justice, which isn't to say those others are not themselves culpable, but because a lot of people refused to testify or took the Fifth Amendment. We just didn't have the same level of detail in the evidence that we had for Donald Trump and for John Eastman.
So for those who are thinking, should I consider the committee's assessment of Rudy Giuliani and Mark Meadows to be in a different basket than John Eastman and Donald Trump? You're saying they are culpable, but the evidence gathered is clearer and, to use your word, more compelling for the first two than Meadows and Giuliani.
Well, just the evidence that's available to our committee, the Department of Justice will have access to a lot more evidence and a lot more prosecutorial tools than we have evidence than we have access to with the limited evidence available to us, given our investigative resources. I mean, there's just no comparison between what the Department of Justice has and what we have. But nonetheless, we were still able to assemble lots of evidence, some of which just seemed overwhelming to the committee in particular cases. And then in others, we basically say to the Department of Justice, please do your job and check it out, because it may indeed lead there. But, you know, I've got no doubt, Major, that none of this would have happened or taken place absent the will of Donald Trump to try to seize the presidency and overthrow the 2020 election. He was absolutely the motor force behind the entire thing. And I don't know that there's anybody in the country who believes any of this would have happened had Donald Trump just done what every other president has done in history and said, I accept the results of the election.
As you know, Congressman, the evidence you have generated, you and the committee, was not in a legal sense, subjected to the adversarial process. That's one of the complaints some Republicans have about the Select Committee and its overall organizational structure. But you're deeply experienced in not only constitutional law, but the practice of law. Do you believe, if even subjected to an adversarial defense attorney approach, the evidence against John Eastman and former President Trump should lead to an indictment?
Well, let's start with this, Major. Any investigation that the Congress engages in is not subject to the adversarial system of prosecution, defense, two sides, as in any adjudicative context. So that's what it means to be the congressional branch. We do research, we do investigations, and we publish our findings. Our committee was a bipartisan committee. The vast majority of our witnesses were Republicans. And the truth is that I've never seen really such an open and shut case of what happened. This is not exactly an Agatha Christie mystery. We know exactly who done it and why he did it and how he tried to go about doing it. If there's another story out there or 10 other alibis or explanations, by all means, bring it on. We didn't encounter any of them in the course of talking to all of these Republicans who were in Donald Trump's administration, who were in his cabinet, who were in his White House, who were in his family. Everybody told the same story, essentially. So obviously the adversarial system will apply in the event that Donald Trump and John Eastman were to be prosecuted by the Department of Justice. And at that point, they would be able to explain maybe how, I don't know, Rudy Giuliani was really responsible, or they would say Antifa really did it, or whatever, defense they would want to concoct. That would be subject to cross-examination and the rigors of the judicial process.
So the referral on delaying a congressional proceeding, others have been prosecuted for that. That seems to be pretty straightforward. Many were surprised, Congressman, about the addition of the insurrection charge. Do you believe that is something that could be prosecutorially met, that is to say, holding the President of the United States accountable for that? And work us through how the committee came to that decision, because the expectation was 3 referrals, not 4.
Yeah. First of all, it's interference with a government proceeding, a federal government proceeding, not a judicial proceeding. And of course, the peaceful transfer of power in the joint session of Congress called for by the 12th Amendment is such a federal proceeding. But on the insurrection point, there are 3 different ways you could prove culpability under that section. And one is you show that there's incitement to insurrection. Another possibility is you show that there's assisting insurrection. And another is you show giving aid and comfort to insurrectionists. And you only have to show one. But in this case, all 3 are clearly present in the case of Donald Trump. He clearly incited the violent insurrection with dozens of statements he made over weeks and days and hours leading up to the attack, including, "We have to fight like hell. If you don't fight like hell, you won't have a country anymore." When there's fraud involved, there are a whole different set of rules apply. We don't give up, we don't surrender, and so on. So there's very clearly incitement, and incitement that fits even within the contours of constitutional law. There's deliberate incitement in a way that's calculated to create imminent lawless action. That's precisely what Trump did. Secondly, though, he assisted the insurrectionists. One way of knowing that is thinking about that tweet he sent out at 2:24 p.m. when he knew that the riot had overtaken the Capitol. He knew that we'd been driven out of the House and the Senate. He knew that the vice president was fleeing. And instead of calling the Joint Chiefs of Staff or the Secretary of Defense or the National Guard or the D.C. Police or the Capitol Police, he sent out a tweet saying Mike Pence did not have the courage to do what needed to be done. In other words, he further assisted the insurrectionists by inflaming and exacerbating the situation. And finally, of course, he gave aid and comfort to the insurrectionists on that day, repeatedly throughout the day, especially when he said, "You're very special, I love you, never forget this day," and so on. But he's continued to do that, including dangling the prospect of a mass pardon of all of the convicted violent insurrectionists if he gets back into office. So all of that shows that although you only need to show that he violated one prong of this statute, he violated all three of them.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland, a member of the January 6th Select Committee, thank you very much. We're getting an inside look at former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's testimony in the aforementioned January 6th investigation. We've got the exclusive audio for you right after the break. You are streaming Red and Blue.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS reports tensions rising between a powerful country and a vital island.
The supply of this technology came grinding to a halt. The world would grind to a halt.
Absolutely. As Taiwan faces threats and aggression,
Taiwan is on the front line, and we understand our responsibility as a democracy. We cannot fall.
CBS News examines whether they can defend themselves.
Putin, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, they are manifestations of the battle between autocracy and democracy. And that is a fight that we're all engaged in.
Defending Taiwan, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme,
States from the plains to the northeast are bracing for more than 2 feet of heavy snow.
Every second counts.
This is a monster winter storm.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
There's a wrinkle in the forecast, the accumulating ice.
You'll have time to get prepared.
Take precautions before you head out.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
After decades in the public eye and public service, this mother-daughter duo is now talking about gutsy women. What's the gutsiest thing you've ever done? We go person to person with Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton.
Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
In today's Money Watch, business analyst Jill Schlesinger is here to help.
How do you even begin to make the best use of your money? If you've got a match from your employer, don't give away that money.
Dollar Jill, y'all.
CBS Mornings, starting at 7.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Major Garrett. As we have been reporting, the House committee investigating January 6th has recommended criminal charges against the former president for his role in the Capitol insurrection. The panel's recommendations come as CBS News has uncovered audio of previously unheard testimony of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn.
Between November 3rd, 2020 and January 20th, 2021, did you have any conversations with any current or former officials at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence regarding election fraud or other irregularities in the 2020 presidential elections? In your phone call with Mr. Cohen, did you tell him that he needed to return to the United States from his trip abroad because, quote, something's about to happen, unquote? And during the second phone call with Mr. Cohen, did you tell him that, quote, we need to have the military take over the election and redo the election, unquote, or something like that?
Flynn's attorney said in a statement that Flynn believes the January 6th committee is engaged in, quote, a witch hunt. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, all you have to do, well, you can see them anytime. All you have to do is go to the CBS News website, cbsnews.com/red and blue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
When folks on the right talk about socialism, it's a boogeyman.
Socialists are always going to promise you free tuition, free healthcare, free everything, but they will never promise you freedom.
I think of socialism as government control.
Wealth is too concentrated at the top right now.
Providing for people the things that they need is actually the world that we were supposed to live in.
Socialism didn't work in Cuba, North Korea, the Soviet Union.
Capitalism is the bedrock of the American dream.
My daughter's one of 40,000 people a year dying from lack of health care in this country. What kind of country am I living in that we're okay with this?
An original CBS Reports documentary